easy one for your brain to engage. All of you eat. All of you have probably had something about nutrition at some point. Any nutrition majors in here? Several. Okay. Please chime in, especially if I say something wrong. Don't let me get away with it. So again, you cannot deal with diabetes unless you can talk nutrition. If you can't talk nutrition, you have got to talk to somebody else. If I was in a diabetes challenge and I had to be dropped naked somewhere in a jungle, I would want a dietitian with me. If I had to have one person that I had to deal with or work with in diabetes, it's a nutritionist. You cannot deal with diabetes unless you can talk food and modify it. There's no way. So they are extremely important people for you to make friends with if you deal with diabetes a lot. Dietitians are considered provider one. Do you know what that means? Have you all talked about provider one? So provider one can order, prescribe, bill without any other oversight. So physicians are provider ones. So dietitians, for certain indications, are provider one. They can see a person with diabetes and they can bill medical nutrition therapy and no one signs off on their note. They're independent in those areas. Okay? So you may find them in smaller areas in independent practice. A hospital will always have one. Now they may work with food service, but they're going to have one. Your bigger group practices will have them because you just can't deal with a lot of diseases unless you have that dietitian. Okay? So find out where they are, wherever you land, wherever you take a job. You'll, by the end, have lists of several people you need to make friends with. Okay? Dietitian's one. Find a pharmacist you can work with. There'll be others that you'll add to. Social worker would be my second person to have. Because in diabetes, the psychosocial needs are so high that you have got to have somebody who can help you from a counseling standpoint or from a resource standpoint. Okay. So that's why I moved nutrition. I didn't do this last year, but I decided that this year we needed an introduction. Some of this we taught in nutrition, but because it is in an odd place in the curriculum at the end, next year we're moving it to the beginning. I felt like we needed to have just go over some basics. Okay. So a lot of this may be things you already know, so your brain doesn't have to work so hard since it's worked hard for the last few days and it's been examined. So in the middle, the fuels we need. So the major macronutrients that maintain everything about our body, to growing it, to repairing it, to maintaining it, are these three macronutrients. Carbohydrates, you know that those are glucose and sugars. That's what they get, that's their building blocks. Proteins are amino acids, fats are free fatty acids for the most part, and glycerol. You might write glycerol off to the side. The body's main goal, one of its main goals, is fuel, requisition, utilization, and deposition, and depositing it somewhere. Okay? So get fuel, use fuel, save fuel. That's what the body's all about. And diabetes is all about disrupting that paradigm. Okay? So there's lots of hormones that influence our appetite, that influence how we use foods, how we deposit foods, store it away. Insulin is a big one for that. There are 4 organs that are really important when it comes to nutrition and nutrient use, and that's the liver. It has a storage capacity. Muscles, who also store some, but also use a lot of the nutrients or the fuel, but also when we get into dire straits, like with type 1 and we have a severe insulin deficiency, muscles become an energy depot or a source that we can tap into. The kidneys do a lot with glucose metabolism and glucose, whether we keep it or we get rid of it. And adipose tissue, the largest storage depot of energy in the body. Okay, so let's talk about carbohydrates. So a synonym for carbohydrate is saccharide, which is a Greek word, which means sugar. So these include sugar, starch, cellulose, plant starch. 4 groups of saccharides. These you should be fairly familiar with: monosaccharides, disaccharides, oligosaccharides, and polysaccharides. So the sugars that we mostly use in the body are monosaccharides. Glucose is a monosaccharide. And then the disaccharides, which are all broken down into monosaccharides. So the body mostly wants to deal with monosaccharides when it comes to fuel. So if you look on up here, you can see that. So here's your monosaccharides: glucose, fructose, galactose. Galactose, glucose are hexoses, fructose, a pentose. So when you talk about those hexose shunts or hexose cycles, that's the 2 sugars. Fructose, pentose, or pentose shunts are also with these 5-carbon ring sugars. The disaccharides: sucrose, most common, made up of glucose and fructose. And then lactose, very common, the milk sugar, galactose, and glucose. Oligosaccharides may not be as familiar with. These are chains of sugars, usually glucose, in 3 to 10 links. Sorry. So some of the sugars, like in beans, cabbage, broccoli, asparagus, those are oligosaccharides. So they're a little bit bigger than the mono and disaccharides, but they're not as big as the polysaccharides. Maltodextrins, if you look at most of your foods, those are additives. Those are oligosaccharides. When you think of the monosaccharides and the disaccharides, think energy source. Polysaccharides are storage. So think storage when you see polysaccharides. So polysaccharide is glycogen. So there's glycogen. These polysaccharides can be very long, linear molecules, or they can be branched like glycogen is. They can be from anywhere from 10 to 2,500 subunits, so they're big. So that's why there's storage. Cellulose is probably the most common of those in the biosphere is a storage starch. Some other examples are down there. Chitin, if you love your lobster and your crawfish and your, what else? Shrimp, I guess. Crab. That is actually a polysaccharide. Okay, so next page. So the role of carbohydrates. Energy. I get upset when people talk about sugar being bad. Sugar's not bad. Sugar isn't bad at all, but we have made it an enemy. Made it an enemy because we overuse it, misuse it, and take it in too big a quantity. But if you didn't have sugar, it'd be like no gas for your car. You cannot go. Any of you ever done a low-carb diet, really low-carb like Atkins? You ever hit a wall? Oh, yeah. After 3 days, I've done that diet several times, tried it. 3 days, I cannot move. I really can't function. Now, some people tell me they get over it and go on. I just can't do it. I love carbs. I've never met a carb I didn't like. So carbs are energy. They're also storage. So we talked about starch, glycogen. Major storage in the body is glycogen. Your muscles store it for quick use. Your liver stores a lot of it and refeeds you that sugar in between meals. So all of you that aren't sipping on something that has a calorie in it are being fed right now by your liver by breaking down the glycogen that it's stored away after you ate. Serves as structural components. We've talked about cellulose for plants, chitin for exoskeletons. Coenzymes are often carbohydrates, components of DNA. So all the sugars, DNA, part of its backbone are those deoxyribose sugars. So we find it even into the thread of life. Okay, so we talked about monosaccharides at the bottom. So simple sugars, glucose, fructose, galactose. Disaccharides to monosaccharides fit together, very easy. Next page, the polysaccharides. Let's see. think I gave most of those to you. We'll talk about that. So let's talk about, if I talked to you at the very end of the day, I was going to have you write down for me what you ate for lunch, and we would go over and identify what the carbs were, but we may just talk about them now. Lots of foods in the carbohydrate realm. So fruits, anything that's sweet is a carb. So fruits have lots of natural sugars in them. Vegetables are carbohydrates. They have a little bit of plant protein in them, but for the most part, they're carbohydrate. Now, they have a third of the sugar in them that fruit does. That's why they don't taste as sweet. Should have been reversed. I think a lot more people would eat vegetables if they were. Complex carbohydrates, we'll talk about it a little bit. Bread is a carbohydrate, it comes from wheat. And then there are things that are made from, or that contain carbohydrates. Milk has carbohydrates in it, as sugar. Breads, potatoes, grains, pastas, all of those are carbohydrates. So a lot of different foods in this category. So carbohydrate metabolism, let's talk about that. So when you eat, your body can break down almost all your food into some sugar source. Even if you just eat all protein, your body can convert a lot of those amino acids into sugars. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. So I always get tickled or not tickled, but I often will have diabetic patients who will tell me, I don't eat sugar. How can I have diabetes? Well, it's easy. Because our body's machinery is very geared towards making glucose. It's our basic fuel. We cannot get away from it. So that a lot of the energy after you eat goes towards making sugar. And glucose is the main sugar the body likes. You all remember these from biochemistry, don't you? Krebs cycle, glycolysis. What's the end game? What is the body trying to do? At the end, it produces what? ATP, energy that it can then break and produce energy for a cell to do what a cell does. So all cells use glucose to fuel their job. So let's talk about the digestion of carbohydrates. So digestion starts in the mouth. The only digestion of anything that the foods that we eat is carbohydrate in the mouth. Proteins and fats we mechanically break down by digestion of carbohydrates starts in the mouth with amylase. It also, a little bit occurs in the stomach, and then a lot of it occurs in the small intestines, and most of our carbohydrates are absorbed out of the small intestines. So let's kind of walk through this. Okay, so it starts in the mouth. Saliva produces has lots of different substances in it that then help us break down our food. So bicarbonate neutralizes acids. We have mucus that moistens the food, not the feed, in the oral cavity. We have antibiotics and isoenzymes that break down any bacteria that could be part of our food. And then the salivary amylase is the big one. For starting to break down the carbohydrate. So that forms a bolus that when you eat and you finally swallow, that bolus goes down your esophagus and gets to your stomach. Not much digestion takes place in the stomach. Now there are the acid and the other enzymes that are present do a lot with protein and fat, but not so much with the carbohydrate. So as it enters the small intestines, then again we have the pancreas produces lots of digestive enzymes. And that's the exocrine part of the pancreas. So more in the head part, it butts up right against the small intestines and produces a lot of enzymes and also a lot of neutralizing substances. Because you go from a pH of 2 in the stomach to what's the pH of the small intestines? 7. So it's a huge, huge change. So the stomach will slowly move what is produced, or what is we call the substance in the stomach chyme. And so the stomach will rhythmically move that chyme into the small intestines. And usually after about 2 hours, you have moved most of that food that you have eaten in a meal over into the small intestines. So a lot more digestion takes place in the small intestines because the food stays there longer. Not in the mouth very long. If you inhale your food or you eat very fast, then it's not there very long. Stomach doesn't do much to help, so the small intestines is where the action is. And that little inset picture shows you that. So there's the acid chyme moving in through the pyloric juncture into the small intestines, and there you can see the pancreas butts up right against there. You also have the liver that has produced bile. Bile is going to emulsify the fats that you have eaten, and all of those go directly into that first part of the small intestines, which is called what? I'm going to tell Dr. McNeil. What's the first part of the small intestines? Thank you. So you've got pancreatic amylase, which is the major digestive enzyme for carbohydrates in the duodenum or duodenum. Now, the other thing that's really important in that small intestines is you've got that high surface area where all those microvilli are that's a structural component. And all those microvilli in the small intestines are disaccharases. And they break down those, the carbohydrates that are left intact, break them down even further into the monosaccharides. And that's how we get to that very fine, smallest building block. This is a really good picture and shows you how that happens. So you have these different enzymes sitting on the brush border, and as those disaccharides come in there, or oligosaccharides, then you break it down. Like this is glucose, this would be galactose here, this would be fructose. One thing that's important to remember is we have a drug that can interact or sit on those disaccharidases and occupy them. The more complex the carbohydrates you take in, the longer it takes for the body to break them down. So that's why fiber is so important, because it slows down this absorption, or the digestion, and then the absorption. Let me show you a... Do you ever get hungry after you eat Chinese food? Isn't that the joke? Eat Chinese food and 2 hours later you're hungry again? It is, because it's simple carbs. It's rice. So when you do like fruit juice is sugar in a solution. And that's why we treat low blood sugars with it. It gets into your system and it is gone in no time. It's like a roller coaster. You keep doing that, it's just a roller coaster. If you drink soda all day long, here's your blood sugar. If you eat oatmeal, then it's more like this. So what's the difference? What's the difference in the slope of this line versus the slope of that line?
Type of sugar.
So the slope is very steep here. So it doesn't take long for that sugar to get to the small intestines, get absorbed, and get distributed. That's why, especially for people with diabetes, and also to give you a sense of fullness, is to have those complex carbohydrates, because the slope of digestion and the rate of absorption is much slowed down by more complex carbohydrates that it takes those enzymes a lot longer to break down. That's why complex carbohydrates are important, and they're better than like a refined sugar or a simple sugar. Okay, middle of the page. Stay with me. I see some of your eyes roll in the back of your head. Okay, so once you've got it down to monosaccharides, they can be absorbed out of the gut and enter the bloodstream. Okay, so think of the bloodstream as a transportation system. It moves stuff around the body, and it's like a delivery system on the highway. So it distributes that sugar out all over the body, until it gets to the capillary. And in that next picture, this one, at that arterial end of the capillary, you see glucose exiting. So glucose can easily leave the blood system at that point. Enters into the interstitial fluid, and then it gets to the cell. And at the cell, it no longer has free movement for in a lot of the organs, like your liver, your muscle, and your fat. It has to have insulin presence in order to move from the outside of the cell to the inside. Now you have organs where they don't depend on insulin. Your brain does not depend on insulin for sugar to get in. That's important, because if it did, we could be in real trouble, especially if we built up a lot of resistance. Brain resistance to sugar can happen. So that's why if you go too long without eating, you can get cranky, or you feel like I can't think as well, because the amount of sugar that's being delivered to the brain is probably decreasing. So the brain can take up sugar without any presence of insulin. So can your red blood cells. So can part of your kidney can do the same thing. So we call those tissues insulin independent. They don't need it. The big dependent organs are your liver, your muscle, and your fat. Those are the resistance organs. So when we get to type 2, those organs become really important because they resist the effects of insulin, and so they can't take up sugar as well. And they contribute to high blood sugars after you eat. Questions about that to this point? So when you eat, you've got immediate needs. So the sugar that you absorb can immediately be used, or it can be stored away. So insulin will do both. It will help you immediately absorb foods, and then it will help you also to put any extra calories, extra sugar that you have, to store it away, either in muscle as glycogen, or in fat, or in the liver as glycogen, or in the fat as adipose tissue. So let me go find this picture. I moved it around in your handout, but also moved it in this as well. Okay, so this is what insulin does. It's really important to understand what insulin does, because then it's much easier to predict what will happen when it's not there. So we've talked about the digestion. Can you see my mouse? Okay, so you've got the digestion of that carbohydrate coming down from the mouth through the esophagus to the stomach and entering into the small intestines. And from the small intestines, it's going to exit as monosaccharides, particularly glucose. Main monosaccharide, glucose. So when food gets absorbed out of the stomach, what vascular system is it going to enter first? Portal. Okay. Why would that be important? Where's the portal vein go? Liver. Why would that be important?
Toxins?
Toxins. Okay, so if you've eaten something you really shouldn't, or the body perceives as being bad for you, it can clear that out. Okay, so that's one reason. So, and insulin secretes, or the pancreas secretes insulin into the portal vein. So the pancreas is always, your gut is monitoring, and your stomach, or your pancreas is always monitoring what is your blood sugar level. As it starts to rise, then the pancreas will release insulin. The gut has special cells in it that also monitor your eating. And when you start to eat, it will send signals to the pancreas and tell them, get ready, food is coming. And so insulin moves to the periphery of those beta cells, and it's ready to be released as blood sugars rise. Okay? So that's really important about where that takes place. So insulin will have an effect on the liver, but as insulin and glucose always travel together, so think of them as traveling companions. And insulin, and the first big organ it's going to encounter is the liver. That's important because the liver has got to replenish what it has used from the time when you were fasting. So that insulin and that glucose get to the liver, and insulin helps the liver then take up that glucose, and the liver will, and the other thing it does, sorry, I can't sit still, I'm so excited, I love this stuff. So the insulin is also a messenger. It tells the liver that you have got to switch machinery. Because when you are not eating, then your liver is breaking down glycogen and putting it into glucose and putting it into your bloodstream. Okay? So when you're not eating, when you're sleeping at night, your liver is refeeding you everything that you're from what you ate during the day. The insulin is a messenger. That first insulin that reaches the liver tells the liver, okay, they're eating, stop doing what you're doing and get ready to take it up. So it switches. So you're going from glycogen breakdown, which we would call what? What would be the term for that? Glucogenolysis or glycolysis, I've heard that. Okay, so glucose. Okay, so when you're not eating, so fasting state, you're going this way. The predominant hormone there is glucagon. Because that's what keeps your blood sugars in normal range. And the body likes to keep blood sugars in a fairly tight range. When you are feeding or fed, then it's going this way. We're taking up glycogen. You got to have insulin present to do that. Okay? So lots of glucose around, glycogen is stored. In diabetes, we're going to see this system fall apart and become impaired, and that's why our blood sugars are going to go up, one of the reasons. Okay? So really important. The other thing we see is that when we get to muscle, same thing happens. Insulin's present, muscle takes up glucose, stores it away as glycogen. For its own personal use, muscles are pretty selfish. They only break down the glycogen and use it for their own use. They don't put it back into the bloodstream. Okay. So insulin has to be present for glucose to be taken up by muscle. Then in fat, so if we've met every need and there's extra glucose, then the insulin will also direct that sugar to be taken up by fat and stored away. So fat is pretty much stored triglycerides. So what's a triglyceride? Looks like that. What are these? Fatty acids. Triglyceride, 3 of them. What's this? Glycerol. Glycerol backbone. Okay? That glycerol, whenever you break down fat, break it down to fatty acids and glycerol. Glycerol can go back to the liver can convert it back into sugar. Okay? Beautiful. Beautiful system. Okay, so that's what happens when insulin's present, everything's working. One of the other things I want you to look on the top of page 7. So let's look at metabolism of carbohydrates. This will be important when we're talking to people with diabetes. If we have low blood sugars, we want something that will very quickly enter a system. So simple sugars, things that the body doesn't have to really do anything to. If you're drinking a soda, if you are sucking on hard candy, if you're drinking fruit juice, sugar in solution, body doesn't have to do anything, you swallow it, it gets into your system within about 10 minutes. That's why it's so valuable for us to use to reverse a low blood sugar. Refined sources of sugar can also enter in quickly. Rice, white rice, anything white, potatoes, rice, of white bread. Very quickly, it's refined, so it's a lot of the things that are in it that made it coarse and harder to eat and chew are gone. So those also enter bloodstream pretty quickly and will raise the blood sugar fast. Complex carbohydrates I showed you. They are harder, they're tougher, they take more time for the body to break down and to release as sugar into the system. But it's really important to know how these foods affect blood sugar, because we can then put together meals that don't raise the blood sugar so high and will sustain somebody over long periods of, for several hours. Can you see the difference if you eat cereal for breakfast and you eat eggs, bacon, and toast? What sticks with you longer? It's the eggs, bacon, and toast. I have to have Dr. Britton, he grew up on a farm, large farm. They had at least 600 acres on where his house was, and his dad owned other acreages as well. And he would tell me he would watch his mother get up in the morning with other women, and they would make breakfast and lunch for all the people who were working on the farm. And this would be, I'm sure it must have been 30 or 40 people. And it was all high fat, high protein meals because they stay with you longer. And they're cheaper. My favorite meal as a kid was white bread with white gravy, milk gravy. God, it was so good. I can still taste it as a Southern mom. Well, we had 4 kids. She didn't work, my dad did. So to feed 4 kids, that was pretty cheap. And it went a long way. So those kinds of foods, a lot of people will use because they go a long way and they're not very expensive. Look at the dollar menu at McDonald's. What is it? It's cheap. It's high fat with a little bit of protein and cheap carbs. So a lot of your patients are going to use those because that's what they can afford. So knowing a carbohydrate that can release quickly, gives them energy, having a protein in there that will be broken down at a more slow rate that contributes some to blood sugar, with some fat will sustain people in between a meal, a mixed meal, rather than just having all carbs. They'll get hungry. Within 2 hours, it's gone. It's been broken down, churned up, sent out, delivered, ready for the next load. Questions about those? Are you still with me? You've heard most of this, yes? A lot of it. Okay, so then let's look at carbohydrate counting. So this is a tool we use with people who have diabetes. Because if we can smooth out their carbohydrate intake, then usually we can get a pretty good, or we can level out response in their blood sugar. So when people eat a lot of carbs here and not many here and over here, their blood sugars just go all over the place. Most of the variation we see in blood sugar in diabetes is due to what they ate. It's almost always the food. Sometimes it's the exercise with it, especially if they're very variable in their output. So what we do with carb counting is we teach them to recognize how many carbs are in the meal that they are eating. Sometimes we'll use that, and when we get to type 1s, we'll talk about it when we use insulin. We can teach them how much insulin to take based on the carbohydrate amount that they take in. So it's a meal planning tool, and we can use it with people that have type 1 or type 2. So it involves keeping track of the carbohydrates in the foods that they're eating. So here are some important things to keep in mind about carbohydrate servings. 1 gram of carb is about 4 kilocalories of energy. It's actually, I think, 3.4, but we round it to and consider it 4 kilocalories of energy. So 15 grams of carbohydrate gives you about 60 calories. So we call that a carbohydrate serving. So 1 carbohydrate serving is usually 15 grams of carbs and provides about 60 calories. We can make equivalents. So you can see this at the bottom. Slice of bread, an apple, an ear of corn all have the same amount of carbohydrate in them. They will all affect blood sugar about the same. Now bread may have 80 calories in it, but those other 20 are due to something else, usually protein, maybe a little bit of fat. Apple is going to be almost all carb. And corn, which is a starchy vegetable, is pretty much all carbohydrate with a little bit of vegetable protein. So a slice of bread, half a cup of fruit, half a cup of a starchy vegetable cooked, so a half a cup of cooked corn, half a cup of potatoes have the same amount of carbohydrate in them. A third of a cup of cooked pasta, a third of a cup of cooked rice, a third of a cup of beans, all have the same carbohydrate content. So we teach this to the patient. We teach them, here's a serving. Here's what a serving is. 4 to 6 ounces of fruit juice, a tablespoon of jelly, 3 cups of raw vegetables. Look how much vegetable you can eat. It has the same amount of carbs that your 1 piece of fruit did. So then what do we do with that? Go over on the next page, page 9, towards the end. So how much carbohydrate do we need every day? Well, we'd like about 50% of your calories to come from a carbohydrate. So the range is 45 to 65 is about right. So you need at least 130 grams of carbs every day. So low-carb diets, they're really not very healthy. They don't provide enough carbohydrate for the body. So we know that 1 gram of carbohydrate is 4 calories. So if we know what the caloric intake of a person is or should be, we can calculate how many grams of carbohydrate they need every day. So I gave you an easy one. So most women need about 1,600 to 2,400 calories a day to maintain. Higher range would be younger women. So if you need 2,000 calories a day, that would be low end for men, but 2,000 calories a day, and you want 50% of those calories from carbohydrate, pretty easy. That's 1,000 calories. Okay? So we can divide that 1,000 calories by 4, because we know that there's 4 kilocalories per gram. Okay? So that gives us the 250 grams a day of carbohydrate. So then what we do is we can divide that, so I divided out, I think I gave it to you, about 16 to 17 carb servings. So what we then do is tell the person we want you to eat 5 to 6 carb servings per meal. If we can get them to do that, and by knowing what a carb serving is, they can choose foods. It makes it fairly flexible for them. And that stabilizes or levels out these ups and downs in blood sugars with the carbs. So that's why this is important. That's why I want you to learn it, because when we come to insulin, we're going to use this a lot. Okay? So then we divide this out. We can make it fairly even, or we can disperse it however we want. So think about what you ate for lunch. Everybody eat lunch? Somebody give me a rundown of what you ate. And let's look and see if we can kind of figure out how many carbs and how many servings they had for lunch. I don't care if it's good or bad, just tell Zane. Here we go.
I started out with a salad.
You had a salad? Okay.
It was spinach.
Okay.
And it had chickpeas and beets.
Chickpeas?
And carrots and tomatoes and onions.
You need more board space. I've been in the cafeteria.
Okay. Veggies. Okay.
And it had
How many cups of salad do you think you had with all the vegetables outside the chickpeas?
just the greens.
Yeah, just the vegetables.
Maybe 2 or 3.
2 cups?
Yeah.
2 to 3 cups?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm glad you cooperated. 3 cups. We'll put it there. Okay. What else?
And then I had a grilled chicken sandwich,
Okay,
and I had it on the bun that they had in there. I don't know if it was wheat or white. I think it was probably white.
okay. And
And
how big was the bun? Did you eat
Uh,
both pieces?
yeah, I ate like 3/4 of the bun, but I ate all the chicken.
So you think they're that big?
Yeah, about that big.
Okay. So that is, so normal, a small hamburger bun is 1 carb serving, both sides, I mean, it's 2. So we'll say yours was 4, if it was about twice the size.
And I had
Okay.
that with lettuce and tomato and onion.
Okay,
And there was mayo and mustard and ketchup on there as well. I don't know if you want to add that in.
Ketchup and onion.
And then
how old are you?
24.
See, but he can eat a lot of calories. What do you think, 3,000? Probably upwards of 3,000 calories a day, so this is nothing.
Sweet.
He's not.
And then I had like a spoonful of rice with a spoonful of beans. It was like they
And
were
together it was 1/3 of a cup, was it that small?
probably like together like a cup.
Oh, spoonful, okay.
It was one of the serving spoons.
Okay.
Yeah, serving
Got
spoon.
it. See, spoons are always relative, okay.
And I had 2 cups of Powerade, the blue Powerade.
$7.
The Powerade.
Oh, Gatorade, oh, Powerade, got it.
Yeah,
got it.
Powerade.
You had 2 cups of Powerade?
Yes.
Okay.
And I had like
Somebody look up that carb content, okay. What?
and I had like half a piece of this chocolate cake.
It is 21 grams of carbs in their bottle, which I'm not sure how many ounces it is, but that's probably 2
So
glasses.
it's how many, 21?
21 grams.
Okay.
And that's all.
Okay, I don't think that's bad. Okay, so let's add up his carbs. So if he had 3 cups of raw vegetables, how much is that? It's 15. And his bun, we'll say 30. Would you go as high as 60? 45? Okay. Okay, where else do you see carbs? Powerade, okay.
Mayonnaise and sugar and ketchup.
Ketchup depends on how much you used.
Sugar.
It was a cup. No, it wasn't a cup. It was like a teaspoon or something like
I'm not
that.
gonna worry about it. Okay, what about the rice and the beans? How many carbs are in there?
I think it was brown rice. I don't know if that counts right.
So how many 1/3 of a cups are in that? So, no, there's 3 servings, so that's 45. Any others? Powerade, you guys? Okay, so what's that come to?
So, a third cup. 15 grams. So she said it'd be about like 2/3 cup. I mean, 30 cups, so 45 grams.
126,
I don't think
126
so. Let's hope that beats.
grams. How many carb servings is
So
that?
it's almost the same as mine.
Divided by 15, what's that come to?
I like that.
No, it's about 8. That's about right. Okay. For someone his age, I think it's very reasonable. So that's how we would determine it. If I was sitting down and he was diabetic, that's why I would be asking him and determining from his calorie amount, how much do I need carbs, and I would start to try and space those out. Or if he really likes the carbs at lunch, that's when we would put them. And we would dose his insulin or his other drugs accordingly. Okay, we'll come back to this tool again. Questions about that? All right, page 10. So here's what a 4-carb serving breakfast looks like. Half a cup of oatmeal, 27 grams, blueberries, 15, because it's a half a cup of, and then the Greek yogurt has about 6 grams per 6 ounces. Tablespoon of almonds, small, 2 grams. Tablespoon of butter, 15. Okay? So that's 65 grams, a little bit more than 4 carb servings. So the nice thing about knowing what a carbohydrate serving is the flexibility gives the patient in choosing. And we would always keep strict, oh, you know what we didn't add in is cake. So he's about that.
Couldn't resist.
We're gonna do this again, we'll use it in our insulin cases as well. So let's go to proteins then. You know proteins are building blocks or amino acids. Their role, you know, building tissue, maintaining tissue, repairing tissue. Hormones and enzymes are made up of proteins, transport molecules, your ferritin, your hemoglobin, antibodies, all made out of protein. And I'm assuming most of you can point out the proteins in your diet. So there's protein. So proteins in your milk, cheese you may not think about. People would also think about their fowl, the poultry, the fish, beef. Beans are a very good source. Eggs are a pretty good source of protein as well. So protein intake for an adult, it should be about 20% of your caloric intake. You can figure about 0.8 grams per kilo for the need or the kind of the basic need for protein per day for an adult that is healthy. Proteins have a lot less effect on blood sugar than carbohydrates do. If you look at the next page, we can convert amino acids into glucose. That's why you can't avoid it. The body can change it. So amino acids are referred to as glucogenic or ketogenic. Most of the amino acids are glucogenic. They can be converted by the liver into glucose. They have metabolites like pyruvate that can be shunted into Krebs cycle or into a glycolytic cycle. There are just a few that are only ketogenic, which are lysine and leucine. They cannot be converted into sugar. So the majority of amino acids can help provide glucose source. So where insulin comes important is you have to have insulin present in a muscle, by a muscle, to take up amino acids. So you can predict what happens in diabetes when you have severe deficiencies of insulin, then you tear down muscle. Okay, it becomes a source of fuel because we can turn it into sugar. So it shows you at the bottom, the muscle stores about 500 to 600 grams of glycogen. Not a lot. We can use that up pretty quickly and have to replace it with every meal. So muscles don't contribute much to blood sugar at all. So glucose and amino acids need insulin's presence to be taken up by the muscle. Page 12, sources of fat. So fats in the body, they are an excellent energy source. They're very dense, so it's 9 calories per gram of fat. You know, it's why squirrels put away acorns. They don't go after Little Debbie's and Twinkies or sugar or candy. That's why nuts, because it's a dense energy source. We need them to insulate, to cushion, to transport fat-soluble vitamins. They're an integral part of the cell membrane, that lipid layer, brain, hormones, hair, skin. So fat's important. It's another demonized nutrient. But if you didn't have it, you'd be a puddle on the floor because you could not make a cell membrane. So fat's important in the right amounts. So dietary sources of fats. If you look at the bottom of the page and then the top of the next page, there are 3 types of fats. There's polyunsaturated fats, those are the most common. The monounsaturated fats and the saturated fats. So monounsaturated fats, there's not that many of them. We call them the good fats. Nuts, avocados, olives, olive oil, those are sources of monounsaturated fats. Saturated fats tend to be animal source fats. So beef is the highest, milk, butter, bacon, things that are made from that. Egg has saturated fat in it. And the rest is polyunsaturated. So most of the sources of fat are going to be polyunsaturated. Recommended intake of fat is 30% or less. Our state ranks about 35 to 40% fat. So we're a higher fat intake state. We want to limit saturated fats because that's what we turn into cholesterol. So saturated fats to be less than 10% of our total daily intake. We'd like to get more of our fats from monounsaturated fats because they have good effects on lipids in terms of HDL. Fats are metabolized to fatty acids in the intestines. They are fats, so they're not very soluble, so we make them into a soluble molecule called a chylomicron. Moves around in the bloodstream and the liver. It moves to the liver uses it to make different structural parts. And the rest is going to be used, if not utilized for fuel, then is stored as adipose tissue. If you look down at the bottom of page 13, it shows you that the energy content of fat tissue in an average sized man is 100,000 kilocalories. So if you divide that by 3,500 kilocalories, which is what's in a pound, you see that we have about 28 pounds of fat. It's not bad, we need it. It gets us through lean times, or times when there's not enough food. So not a bad thing, it's just when it's too much, it causes us problems. Insulin has to be present for fat to become fat, or to make adipose tissue. So if you don't have insulin, then the fat will break down very quickly into fatty acids and glycerol. So you need glucose to be able to take up glucose and fatty acids and make adipose tissue. You have to have insulin present. So that's why we call insulin an anabolic hormone. It builds up tissue. When we don't have insulin around, we get into a catabolic state. We'll tear down everything to give us fuel. Okay. So this is a good kind of picture to keep in mind when you're talking to people with diabetes. Carbohydrates have almost 100% effect on blood sugar. Proteins have a minimal amount. In type 2s, we rarely count in their protein in terms of what's going to happen with their blood sugar. With type 1s, we may very well take into account the amount of protein. Fats have very little effect on blood sugar. When I was a diabetes educator over at Family Medicine, we used glucose sensors, and we had purchased a new one, so I wore it just to see what I was going to have to ask patients to do. And I wore it for 5 days. So that glucose sensor samples the sugar in your interstitial fluid every 5 minutes, and it stores it away. And then you can download it. You also check your blood sugar, and it correlates what the sugar was in your interstitial fluid to what was probably in your bloodstream at the time. So I wore it for 5 days, and I did a different diet every day. I just wanted to see what my blood sugar would be like. I don't have diabetes, so I run very normal. But the day I did Atkins, my blood sugar was flatline. I just ate protein and fat. I avoided carbohydrates at all. My blood sugar was just like, never changed. One day I ate chocolate all day long. My blood sugar was all over the place. It was great. So it really does, it is very true. So we want people, usually with people in diabetes who are really having trouble stabilizing their blood sugar, we'll up the amount of good fat in there, just to keep them satisfied and to decrease the amount of carbs that they're needed to keep their blood sugars more even. Do you know how to read a label? I want you to practice. We'll do some here, and when we get to nutrition, we'll spend more time on it. These are gonna change their format a little bit next year, but but stay reasonably the same. So when you're talking to people with diabetes, you have to teach them how to use a food label. So food labels are standardized to this. All food sources have to have a label. It's a requirement of law. So they will tell you, first of all, what the serving size is. That's important to pay attention to, because if you get a bag of potato chips, full bag, is not a serving size. It's usually about 7 or 8 servings. So this tells you how many servings are in the product as you bought it. This tells you how many calories per serving, and then it tells you calories from fat. Then it breaks down the fat for you, tells you what the total grams of fat, Zane.
Is the serving size, is that just like an arbitrary set point?
No.
So it's
No.
standardized?
There's no standardized. The manufacturer gets to decide that.
Okay,
So it's the people, whoever makes it decides.
okay.
Isn't it usually based like on a 2,000 calorie diet for
The daily values are,
Yeah.
but the serving size has nothing to do with it. It's what they've decided. So if Little Debbie is 2 Little Debbies as a serving, then that's what it is. If it's a bag of Oreos, it's not the whole bag, it may be 2 Oreo cookies. Okay, so total fat, they will always tell you the amount of saturated fat. They may also show you polyunsaturated and the monounsaturated. Trans fats, they will also show you, but nowadays almost everything is 0. But that doesn't mean there isn't trans fat in it. I think if it's less than 1, they can put 0. Then they'll show you the amount of cholesterol, sodium, total carbohydrates, and they will break down the total carbohydrates into dietary fiber and the amount of sugar that makes up that carbohydrate. So there's different forms of that carbohydrate, and then how much protein. Then they will tell you, these are all for right now, these are the only vitamins that and minerals that they'll tell you. A, C, calcium, and iron. The new guidelines next year we'll get a lot more information on this. Again, it's based on a 2,000 calorie diet, so that's what those daily values are. I hate those daily values. To me, they are very difficult for patients to understand, so I pretty much go by, when I'm teaching somebody carbohydrate counting, I want you to look at how many total carbohydrates are in that product by that serving. If you're not familiar with doing labels, start picking up the labels of the foods that you buy and looking at them. Start to get a sense of what is in the foods that you're eating, so you can start to get a sense of what we're asking patients to do. Questions about those? We will revisit this again. BMI charts, I want you to know what a BMI is. Because we'll talk about that when we're diagnosing people or we're looking at risk. So BMI looks at your height and weight. There's lots of controversy about BMIs because people can be very large, particularly athletes, men. They have lots of muscle mass. Maybe they have a very high BMI, but they may have a very low fat composition. So there is controversy, but in general, it's a good tool. If you look at your handout, the last page, interpreting BMIs. So a normal BMI is 18.5 to 25. So to use that chart, you would find your height and your weight, and that would tell you your BMI. So if you are 5'5" and you weigh 120 pounds, your BMI is 20, if I'm reading it right. Dead normal. Over 25 and over are the ones that we're going to start to pay attention to, because that becomes a risk factor for diabetes. Obese is 30 and above. In obesity, we break into 2 groups, 30 to 34.